Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the Board of Education and Business Committee meeting together for Tuesday, February 22nd. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, where we live, learn, and play. First item of business is the adoption of the agenda. Motion to adopt the agenda. Trustee DeGroot, Trustee Thorne. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes of the January 25th Board of Education and Business Committee meeting. Is there a mover for that? Trustee Kemmler, you were there, and seconded by Trustee DeGroot. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Action list.
Sorry, it took me a while to get there. One item on the action list, and it was to meet with QP and USW to discuss Time Bank and the school district closure week. We held those meetings in the last couple of weeks, and we'll be reporting to the board at a later date. So that task is now complete.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for knocking one off. Petitions and delegations, we have none tonight. So we do have four presentations. First of all, under education, Fiona Somerville. Claire, is Fiona with us tonight? A school plan presentation on Paulson Elementary.
Hello,
hi,
everyone.
Fiona.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to share a screen with you. So I will be talking through a PowerPoint presentation, and I just want to say it's very nice to be invited to have this opportunity to talk to you all. Give me a moment. Can you see that all right?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, I'm gonna take a deep breath. I'm nervous. I know I'm just, that's just the person I am. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about Paulson Elementary. So excited to be talking to you. That emblem that you see there, I just want to share with you that was done by a couple of our PAC presidents a couple of presidents ago. She's a graphic designer, and she currently is up in Prince George going to university to be a doctor, and then she's going to return to the lake to be a doctor in this lovely little rural community that we have.
Wonderful.
So I just wanted to first talk about our story. Paulson is located in the town of Lake Cowichan, as you know, on the traditional unceded lands of the Zubasat people. We're kindergarten to grade 3. We currently have 9 divisions with 189 learners. And our learners reflect a diverse range of strengths, abilities, needs, and socioeconomic backgrounds. This current school year, we have 63 kindergarten students, so which was the largest number in the district for this year. And as just to show the growth that's happening in this region, we already have 43 kindergarten registrations for next year, with the likelihood that it could go as high as about 59. So again, just a lot of growth and development happening in this region. Just want to share that we also have a before and after school care program that works out of our gym, as well as a well-attended Strong Start program that is on site. Some of you might know about the new daycare facility that's in the final stages of completion on site. It was quite an amazing thing for our kids to see some of those jobs at work as the crane was bringing in all the pieces and all the workers were setting everything up. So we're excited to be seeing that soon, and that will provide 27 daycare spaces for preschool age children for the community. So that's really exciting for this area. And so many positive responses and feedback from families about the thought of it being on the school site that their children will then attend. So it's just wanted to share that with you, that it's a really great thing for this community. And so you should be really proud that that's happening. The school property also includes Friendship Forest, which is home to a wide range of flora and fauna, including elk And we have a fish-bearing stream called Oliver Creek, and it has trout and salmon in it. If you have not had the privilege of having a walk through our forest, we'd love to have you out anytime where you can have that tour. So this is just a picture of some of our learners out there in one of our old cedars stumps, because this area had been logged previously. So there's some really interesting, I guess you could say, examples of old time logging in the forest as well. I just wanted to also share that we are a staff that continually explores the 5 elements of play in the early learning framework. That's a big thing for our school. Those elements of play that we work with in our K-3 learners are inquiry play and collaborative play, as well as learning games and playful learning. We always take the approach of naming it, noticing it, nurturing it when it comes to our learners for those elements, as well, of course, as free play. Play is integral to well-being and learning. That is a quote from the document of the Early Learning Framework that we did a lot of work with on our staff last year, and we had a collaboration team that put together some amazing posters. Mike Russell and Brenda Lee were also parts of that, and we're really proud to be able to share those posters with the kindergarten teachers in the district this year, as well as other people that have asked to have those in their building. So we're really proud of that. This is just another picture of Oliver Creek with one of our learners out. You know, this space is enjoyed daily by our staff and our students. It's just such an amazing learning environment. I want to talk a little bit about our strengths as learners, students, and staff. We have things like relationships, growth mindset, strong school community. We're inclusive and supportive. We're always engaged and joyful, nature loving, willingness to engage in professional learning. In our 2021 school learning survey data of grade 3s, 100% of our students felt 4 or more adults cared for them at the school. And that's just something I just wanted to share with you, because we were very proud of that, the fact that we had that confidence and trust and caring from all those students. Some of our stretches, though, we have, you know, we all have them, students and staff. We felt that we've had a little bit of a lack of planned structured time, often can be interrupted by so many things that we have going on in the building. We wanted to see as a staff about finding cohesive tools and resources and strategies to support our learners, and to develop a common language among teachers to facilitate common practice. Based upon our school assessment data, the early success screen had shown that 79% of our kindergarten students were ending the year proficient or extending in reading and writing skills. But we were noticing that there was a decline as it moved through grades 1, 2, and 3. And by the end of grade 3, the numbers of learners who were proficient or extending had dropped to less than 40%. And this was really concerning for us. And so as a staff, we had to, you know, be really reflective on that. We had to talk about this data. And of course, that data leads you on a journey of reflection, questions, deeper discussions around our practice. We discussed past and current practices, relevant studies, street data, assessment, all in the time of COVID, because it cannot be forgotten that our experiences through this pandemic have also caused challenges in many ways. So from these discussions, we came up with our goal. Our school learning goal was under the literacy umbrella to improve the reading and writing literacy capabilities and level of retention for all students K-3. Seems really broad, but we just, you know, there's just so much we're needing to want to embrace and work on. So from these, we came up with some actions, supporting and implementing a consistent yearly plan for all staff and assessment in reading and writing, reviewing grade teams after each assessment period and plan for targeted supports for learners using the UDI for intervention, supporting the use and implementation of evidence-based literacy strategies in all grades, support professional development in supporting the independent reader and explicit teachings of the 5 critical reading components: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, and conduct more student interviews to gain their voice and how they're feeling about their reading and writing journey. For staff development, these are some of the things that we've been working on to help support us in this. They've undertaken different opportunities to develop their practice as it relates to our learning goal. Book studies, new programs, So like the Equipped for Reading Success, wonderful. So many staff are just loving it and reading it and using it. We have a collaborative grant group that's looking at phoneme and grapheme visual development. Also to partake in professional learning opportunities in relation to the 5 critical reading components. We feel very much that this is a journey of discovery. We are seeing growth in the areas we are focusing on for our learners, but this is something that we'll be working on for a couple of years. We are seeing practices being implemented that are working for our learners. We are a cohesive staff that continually support each other as we work to change results for our youngest learners. A little bit beyond the data part, I wanted to share with you that we are a CALM school. All teachers are supporting the use of the CALM curriculum. This program helps support the social and emotional well-being capabilities of young children and adults around them. We are happy to be participating in this as a whole school pilot project. So from our fine arts teacher to our resource teacher to every classroom, including myself, we are participating in this program, and we're really enjoying that. Also, I wanted to share with you about our playground upgrades. This year, we'll see the completion of a 3-stage plan to increase the accessibility of our playground. This was a big project for our PAC, and it's been wonderful to see it coming to fruition. In total, the PAC and school will have fundraised and spent close to $50,000 on the project in the last 3 years. Stage 1 was an upgraded walkway. Stage 2 has been switched to wood fiber for the ground covering. And stage 3 will be installing 3 standalone pieces that allow for inclusive play. Also, we have a friendship forest plan. We're hoping to continue to work with forestry engineers and volunteers to make it a fire smart forest and participate in the reparation of the creeks and trails with a focus on eradicating invasive species. Also looking to increase district signage to remind communities that we use the forest as a learning space. This is an example of the sign that we're going to be having created. Thanks to Mike Russell for helping me with this. For example, some of the things, just as a reminder, because we do share this space with the community, but we wanted to remind that it is a learning space for our kiddos, and that there's just some things that we want to be mindful of as they're using the space with us. Also, I just want to share that words are important. The other thing that we're working on, I'm really excited about, is completing the special grant project for educational signage in Friendship Forest. We're creating 4 educational signs for Friendship Forest that will be appropriate for our K-3 learners. And they will have a picture of a plant or a tree. We're still narrowing that down. And we're going to have words in English, Dididat, Hokaminam, and in Braille. So having you as a district make the change to our signs out here in the lake to honor the Zubasset people and the language that they have was really important to us. So I just want to say thank you for our sign that is considerate of the place of this place as we live, work, and play on these lands. Heichka. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. What an excellent presentation. You had nothing to be nervous about, and you certainly celebrated your school community with style. Thank you so much. I have one question before I turn it over to 189 kids. How long have you been there, Fiona?
This is my 5th year.
So if you go back 3 years, how many, or 5 years, how many kids were there when you first arrived?
So it was, so I'm going to go to 8 divisions. So it was 8 divisions, and we're now at 9 divisions. So we had, it might have even been 7 divisions when I first came. So it is a steady growth. And like, as of right now, with that many students, I have space for 1 student in the school. I had 5 students come to our school since January. So it's, it's wonderful, but it's just a very busy place. A lot of people moving into the area, not a lot of people moving out. So I'd say we've had a growth of probably, like last year we knew at the end of last year that we were going to be at 9 divisions for this year because of our numbers, because of our kindergarten enrollment, which is why we do that in January and February. And so this year has been 9. And, as I'm working with the district about looking at our numbers, what they might be for next year, I'm going to say it's probably going to be very consistent or more.
Wow, thank you. Trustees, questions of Fiona? I don't see any hands up. Fiona, thank you so much for your time, and keep up the wonderful work.
Okay, thank you. And we have an open door policy. We'd love to have any visitors anytime. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So the next two presenters have a hard act to follow. Glenn Posey is next with a 3-year plan for the technology.
Okay,
Hello, Glenn.
hi, Rob and everyone. Hi, Squale, everyone. Good day. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak about our instructional technology and innovation plan. Just give me a moment, I'll get the screen share set up. Okay, and Rob, can you just give me a thumbs up that you're seeing my slide deck? Excellent. Okay. So I'd like to get started just with a bit of a slide share. It's a video that summarizes our technology plan strategic priorities, and then after which we'll dig a little bit deeper into the plan itself.
The Cowichan Valley School District, Instructional Technology and Innovation 2020 to 24, Plan Summary. Globalization and technological advances are creating rapid social and economic change. By the time today's learners graduate in the 2030s and beyond, problem solving and resilience will be essential as job skills will quickly evolve and become obsolete. Besides being literate across domains, students will need skills to help them interpret the world and flourish in an ever-expanding technological and data-driven environment. Technology must be infused in daily learning to provide and support students in entrepreneurism, technical skills, and knowing how to protect their personal privacy and security. Competencies to create and innovate, contribute socially, collaborate with others, and think critically. The Cowichan Valley School District Instruction and Innovation Department, along with our partner groups, believes in co-creating technology-enriched learning environments, offering students personalized, anytime, anywhere, transformational, technology-infused learning. Strategic priorities: expansion of internet bandwidth at each school, improved wired and wireless networks across schools through stronger security, traffic shaping and 10G switch connections, provision of ongoing staff training and professional development to support instructional practice in digitally rich learning environments. Expansion of strategic leasing to keep technology equipment on a 3 to 4 year refresh cycle. A continued system-wide focus on privacy and security. Ensuring actions are aligned to the broader district strategic plan focused on learning, Indigenous ways of knowing, a culture of care and future-focused systems. The Cowichan Valley School District Instruction and Innovation Department, excellence through innovation.
So that whiteboard animation sort of sums up the plan in a quick few minutes, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper now. First of all, if we look at the pillars of the plan, this graphic's been around for a while, but it really outlines the need for infrastructure and standards that provide that solid base on which we can build all of our other platforms, our web services, our cloud data, our instructional practices and training, and then ultimately getting to where we want, which is learning amplified by instructional technology. If our networks don't work, if we've got poor wireless connectivity, it makes things really difficult. It's the same as if our power goes out in our house. If things aren't working, things are very difficult in our classrooms. So within the pillars of the plan, of course, the first is to provide excellent physical networks and wireless networks to support cloud-based tools. We regularly upgrade and tweak our networks so that we can squeeze as much performance as possible out of the connections. This is essential as we've got more and more devices that are continuing to come onto our networks. We've gone from just computer labs to laptops to cell phones to tablets to watches to TVs. And if the trend continues with the Internet of Things, we're heading into smart lights and smart plugs and stoves. So all of those things take network performance. So that's a really key aspect as a foundational piece. We also want to talk about maintaining a strong privacy and security posture. As we move more and more of our work into the cloud and our systems are interconnected, it's critical that we have a strong security posture. And just as importantly, our end users understand how to keep their private data safe so that they don't become unwilling participants in surveillance capitalism. And that continues to grow at an alarming rate. And surveillance capitalism, put simply, is if the product is free, you are the product. And the big social media companies, for one example, they're mining your data all the time, and they're trying to steer the way you think and also get you to purchase things. Moving on to other key goals of the plan, we want to provide equitable access to technology for students and teachers. We want to have a minimum ratio of 1 portable device to every 3 students. In many of our schools, we're approaching a 1-to-2 ratio because schools have supplemented what we can do at the district level. And we also are working hard to refresh our teacher equipment on a 4-year cycle as much as possible. And that's much better than we have been ever able to do in the past. And in order to support that, we're expanding our strategic leasing so that we can have consistent life cycle management. As machines start to get older and age out, we can take them off lease and then start over again. And it helps keep our equipment current and keeps our service time and repair time down on that equipment. And then, of course, ultimately, as we get into the learning piece, we want to support the development of student competencies that provide a combination of creative, entrepreneurial, and technical skills. And that's all supported with the right technology devices. And we also want to connect to the broader strategic plan, and that's by focusing on applied learning and authentic real-world learning experiences. And one of the great examples of that is our challenge-based learning classrooms. And in those classrooms, our teachers focus on real-world problem solving that's integrated across the curriculum. There's no predetermined solutions, and it's all amplified by the infusion of technology. The program started with 3 classrooms 3 years ago and has grown to 30 participating classrooms across 8 schools, with 2 of them now being in our secondary schools. So that's really exciting. So why is all of this important? If we look to organizations such as the OECD as a bit of an educational think tank, papers such as this talk to the need to prepare our students with skills to thrive in a world with ever-expanding AI and skills obsolescence. This particular document argues that students leaving school now need to have technology skills that are intertwined with some different things, some non-routine cognitive skills such as creativity, problem solving, social and emotional skills, and also combined with lifelong learning and curiosity mindsets so they can thrive. So it's about graduating with the best possible life opportunities, having employability. And I'll share one example from sort of general workplace globally right now. If we look at cybersecurity as one small area, the opportunities there are quite staggering for people with skills. So in 2019, they were talking that globally we had a skills shortage of about 4 million positions. And in 2020, a study showed that in the US, out of 942,000 jobs, there was about half of those that were unfilled. So just one example. So developing our plan. This plan is developed through the expertise of our District Tech Advisory Committee members, the street knowledge they share, and we also get feedback from students and teachers and principals and support staff and our senior leadership team. So we ask questions of teachers every year about the types of equipment they'd like to be working with. We ask students a similar question. And this year in the spring, we asked them what activities supported by technology would you like to be doing more regularly to demonstrate your learning in unique ways? And interestingly, animation, video creation, coding, app design, those were the top responses. So when we look at what types of equipment and software and tools we're providing in the classrooms, these are the types of things that we take into consideration. If we look at how the plan is put together overall, it's about a 38-page document, with the core of it being organized around training and innovation, instructional technology, administration and excluded staff technology, support staff technology, technology hardware and software selection or standards, and then infrastructure. And inside each of those broad categories, each goal area has sub goals on how we're going to move things forward, a current status statement, the actions that are required to meet the goals, the lead contacts, and then the cost of the proposal year over year, or laid out multi-year, depending on what that is. So we are a technological organization. And just to summarize the plan a little bit differently, it's a layered plan and it touches all aspects of the organization. So the plan supports business operations, things in transportation and facilities, cameras on buses, and Wi-Fi in bus compounds to retrieve footage from those buses. The plan supports servers for heating systems and door key cards that unlock our buildings, and print management for security and reduction of our carbon footprint. We support our financial systems with the plan, and servers and databases that track assets. On our school side, the plan supports My Education BC and SSDAS, which are student information systems that allow us to run our buildings and schedule and timetable. The plan touches our library systems around resource circulation from schools and advanced booking systems from our central district learning commons. And it also supports all these infrastructures. So the networks behind the walls, the little Wi-Fi boxes that provide us the ability to work just about anywhere in our buildings, phone system selection and replacement, cell phones that allow everyone to work with just about anywhere. And then ultimately, all of these pieces are designed to support our students through the infusion of technology into classrooms. So it allows our educators to redefine learning experiences. It allows them to take those learning experiences outside of the classroom as well. And if we look at Mill Bay Nature School or as an example, we've got Wi-Fi right into the back forest where students can be doing research and collecting information. And at Francis Kelsey, we've now got directional Wi-Fi that covers their entire front field for different events that they might do. And ultimately, the plan aligns to our larger, broader strategic plan. So I'd like to thank the DTAC members that helped draft this plan. It's a living document. We do look at it and revise it regularly. And I also want to talk about and thank the technical staff and our learning team who are instrumental in implementing the plan and making it come to life. They work under the hood, they work behind the scenes. And we do this with a very small team for the ratio of equipment and the expectations of our end users, who really expect technology to run now like a utility. Just like the tap at your sink, you turn the faucet and the water runs. That's the expectation of performance from our technology. And we try to get there 99% of the time. So we have 6 technical staff, about 4,600 devices. So that's about 750 computing devices per technician, plus peripherals. So all our cell phones, printers, copiers, scanners, smart boards, robots, all of these things the team can get called on to support at any time. And then we've got 3 positions that are super important in supporting the technical how-to of our software. That's our district technology support teacher. We have 1 student information system manager, and we've got a district library assistant. And each of these individuals supports the software implementation and use for all of our staff and adults in the system. And from there, I'll move on to any questions.
Thank you, Glenn. I have a couple of questions. First of all, you talked about a ratio of portable devices to students. Is it the same ratio at the elementary level as the secondary?
We try to maintain, yes, we try to maintain that as close as we can. And as I said, some schools have, based on budgeting or fundraising or other, have achieved an even greater ratio than that.
Okay. And then you talked about the portable devices. What is the most common portable device our students are using right now? Is it an Apple product or is it?
So in our K to 7, it is an Apple iPad. So we're heavily iOS. And then as we move into secondary, we believe the students need to be seeing a mix of devices. So they'll see Windows devices, they'll see desktop, laptop, they'll see Apple desktop, laptop, and we also have iOS iPad. So they see the more broad gamut of devices.
One last question. This is a 3-year plan. Do you start again planning in 3 years, or is this revisited every year?
This is an ongoing, it's sort of a living document.
Yeah.
And as the committee is having conversations, as we meet 2 to 3 times a year, and if we feel that there's a turn or a change in direction, that gives us time to respond and look forward. For example, something coming off the lease, do we want to do something different? Or are we carrying on with a refresh in a similar direction?
Thank you. Trustees, questions of Glenn at this time? Trustee Croft.
Glenn, thank you so much. I just thought that's such a clear overview of what I'm sure is some pretty complex stuff going on in the background. So thank you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what in the old world we would have called media literacy and in the challenge classroom. So does the combination of curriculum and technology, is this helping students discern credible information and differentiate it from hyperbole and detect fallacy and that kind of thing?
So that's a key part, I think, of all of our curriculum is to work on that social responsibility. Do you have media smarts? Is that credible, and how do you know, or how might you cross-reference and determine if that's credible? And more we're trying to provide learning opportunities for our teachers around supporting those types of conversations.
Thank you. Trustee Spilsbury.
Thank you. Glenn, thank you for the presentation. What a comprehensive, extremely large scope you are dealing with for the district. It's wonderful to see. I was just looking very quickly on the members of the committee and remembering about the DSAC presentation to the board last year, and I think it was last year, where they were very keen about commenting on the kind of technology that they had access to and what the recommendations were. And I just wondered if there was a student representation on your committee, or how you bring in student voice.
So 2 ways. So we have included now, we've had 2 regular DSAC members come and represent from DSAC. We had a third, but we've had 2 consistently attending. And also we now, as of last spring, we've expanded our survey of our students as well. So they were able to be surveyed. They got a little video presentation and then they were able to respond to us in detail. So we've done both of those things to try to continue. And our most recent DSAC meeting, DTAC meeting, get these acronyms straight, the Tech Advisory Committee, we had DSAC representation there as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Croft.
You mentioned about the, you talked about surveillance capitalism, and then we also talked about cameras on the buses, and we know when kids swipe and stuff. How do we dispose of that information?
So generally we have a retention policy. So we'll retain things for a certain length of time, and at which point our servers will automatically pair that information. So if we haven't had a request for something in 90 days, there's no need for us to retain that. And then it will be deleted of them. Yeah, and because our servers are here local, yeah, we're in control. So we're very cautious about where we're putting our data and who owns the data, and if we can delete the data if we need to.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Seeing another hand, I have one more question, Glenn. Is the Board of School Trustees adequately funding this plan?
I mean, it's always easy to say, gee, more is better. I would say what we are funded or have been funded, particularly under COVID, adequately. As we continue to grow, there will be a strategic pressure, because as we continue to grow, we need to provide more teachers with equipment, more classrooms need to be set up with display technology. And we need, if we want to hold our ratio so that students have equitable access, we will need to fund that as well. So we have DTAC just met, and we have developed a bit of a recommended formula that we'll bring back to Jason for consideration to come back to the board to say, as we grow, here's how we could possibly consider adding to our technology budgets in a fair way, so that we're meeting the needs as we grow.
Thank you, Glenn. Great answer. Very politically correct too. That was good. Glenn, just thank you for all you do and keeping us well connected. So thank you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Next up is supporting Indigenous learning. We have 4 presenters, Larry, Darlene, Jen, and Danny. Claire, if you could bring them all in. I believe they're all here tonight. Hi, Danny. Hi, Jen. Hello, Larry. Hello, Darlene.
Oh, my apologies. I'm talking with, I tried to share my screen. I shared my screen and then I hid myself, and then I couldn't see my mic. Couldn't see anything. Hi, Squell. I'm usually better at tech than this. I don't know what's going on here. So I'm going to try sharing my screen again and see if it works a little bit better this time. Interesting. You still disappear. I don't know what you've done with your settings there, Jason, but Squell, it's good to be here today. We're going to be chatting a little bit about our literacy initiative within the school district. Some of the things that we've been working on. I've got a team with me today. You can see them, I cannot, but Danny Morrow's with us, as well as Jen Calverley. And I've also got Darlene Crane, who is our district principal of literacy and instruction. We've also got Charlie Coleman's going to try to jump on if he can. He had a conflict. He had an appointment that he couldn't change. So without further ado, I guess I'll just get started here. So let me just kick off by saying, oh, here we go. Snapshot. Aitsquel CM Nusiatia, I Nusqualwin Quanasilam Nala, Schweitz to Enes, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that today we're gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the First Nations people, the Hulkaminam speaking people, and I'm actually zooming to you from the nation, Cowichan Nation, and near the village of Quamitsan. So it's good to be here today. What I'm going to be talking about is a little bit about some of our Indigenous student snapshot data that we've been collecting over the years. And we've been doing this now for a couple of years, and it's been really informative as we're moving forward in really trying to close that achievement gap for our Indigenous learners. So we have got a number of data sets that we can draw from. What we do is twice a year now, we pull this data from schools. It lands in a spreadsheet similar to what you're seeing here. It's much bigger than this though. Add another 15 columns to it. And we're able to filter this out at a number of levels. We can filter it down to exactly per student. We can filter it by school, by nation, by on reserve, off reserve, Métis, how many students are landing in the red or the green or the yellow. And as you can see at the top for us, students who land in the green are students who are doing well. We're no concerns with them. They're doing fine. They continue on their same path. They should graduate. Yellow is, we've got some concerns. They're doing all right, but may need a few interventions, a few supports to make sure that they're being successful. And then the red would be, we need some supports. We need we've got some big concerns about how they're progressing, either academically with their attendance or socially, emotionally. Those are the three areas that we look at. And as you can see from this data, we can actually look year over year. So Aliciana here, who's kindergarten last year, is in grade 1 this year, was in the red last year. COVID, pandemic, not a surprise, but has really improved into this year. So that, to us, that's a big positive. And we can do that comparison year over year. And as we get further into the data here, you'll be able to see how we've done some comparisons of year over year and what it's telling us. So for example, this transition data, this is looking at our students who are in this school year compared to last school year, and looking at last year's grade 11 cohort at the top here at 121, became 162 in grade 12. What does that tell us? That tells us that a number of students who were grade 12 last year have come back for an extra lap for that 6th year. And so that's why the number's a little bit greater. Same thing with the grade 11 cohort, a little bit of growth. That tells us that probably a number of grade 11 students came back to do an extra year in grade 11. We have some anomalies here that we're looking into. Grade 8, so last year's grade 7s, we lost 15 students. Where did we go? Where did they go? That's some work that we're doing right now in the Indigenous Education Department. We are getting our Indigenous Ed Department is actually looking at, we can go and find exactly who those students are that didn't come back, identify them. We're reaching out to their previous schools, last year's schools, to find out the stories. What's actually happening with them? Where did they go? And what do we need to do to support? Maybe they've gone to Soup District. That's fine. Well, let's look into this in a couple of years and see if they're still in Soup District. Or maybe they've stopped attending. Well, let's reach out to the family and see what we can do to help them re-engage. We can look at the data on a number of levels. One of them is the academic data, how the students are doing academically. We can break it down by grade like we've done here. And then what we're able to do now is compare year over year. And as we continue to add to this spreadsheet, we're going to have data when kids in kindergarten right now, when they go in 8 years and transition into Quamitchin, we're going to be able to look back and look at how they did in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, all the way through to grade 7, and share that data with Quamitchin as the students landing into Quamitchin. They're going to be able to have a clearer picture on how kids are doing. And obviously our goal is to have fewer students in the red and more students landing in the green. And here, when we do that comparison, so looking at last year's data, I hope you can see my mouse moving here, but as we look at last year's data and then compare it to this year's data, we can see some areas of concern or academically. So our grade 12 students have dropped a little bit when we compare potential grad rates. So when we add up our number of students or percentage students who are in green and percentage students in yellow, assuming we get all those yellow to green and get them graduated, we land with this grad rate, 57%. Floats around where we're averaging, kind of in that 50 to this year, we had the bump up to 63% in our last year. So you could see that grad rate there. But when we compare this year's grad rate of 57% to last year's at 60, sorry, what would have been? Actually, you can't see it here. It'd be a total of the red or green and the yellow, but you could see it, it comes up with a change of about 4.6%. So we're losing a little bit of ground here academically in these years. This one here is a big surprise for us, grade 10. What's with the big jump in grade 10? Well, kids in COVID, some kids didn't attend grade 9 and then they landed into grade 10 at Cal High. So, you know, grade 10 is certainly one of the tougher years. So not a huge surprise, I guess, there. We have some grades that cohorts that have actually improved. And then when we look at the social emotional stats by grade level, it tells a little bit different story, especially when we look at the comparison between this year's and last year's data. Our grade 12s and grade 11s, although they're struggling academically, we've seen some improvement in their social emotional growth. So what does that tell us? Well, maybe our outreach teachers are reaching out and connecting to those students a little bit better. Maybe our Swallow Tsoughton or Tsoughton positions are reaching out and connecting a little bit better. This is that transition point going from grade 9 to grade 10. So you can see that we're struggling a little bit with that grade, but hopefully as we compare this data moving forward, we'll see more students landing in the green, fewer students landing in the red. At least that's the goal. Now, this is where we're able to pull this data out by band and on and off reserve. So we've done that comparison here as well. And look at this, when you add up our 15.4% of on reserve in the green plus the 24 in the yellow, again, assuming all the yellow become green, we land with about a 39 to 40% on reserve grad rate. That's about where we're at right now. We're floating in that 33 to 40 to 41% on reserve grad rate. So if we do nothing different and we don't address our kids that are in the red, we're going to continue to have that below average on reserve grad rate. Now, here's an interesting one. When we look at the off reserve Métis non-status and Inuit, when you add up that number, here we're landing in that 69%. That's about where we're sitting right now, 69, 70, 71% for that group of students who are graduating. Now, if we do nothing different, that number is not going to go up unless we start addressing the students who are academically landing in that red, those students who need some serious support. And then when we compare it year over year or previous year to this year, we see a decline in this year's data. We're hoping again to see a bump up when we do the second snapshot in May, and especially as we head into next year and come out of this pandemic and see more kids attending school regularly. Now we can actually break this down by nation too. This is the total number of students in that are registered within our school district by nation: Sabasset, Staminas, Halop, Cowichan, Malahat, and Penelakut. This is the change from last year. You can see we dropped some Staminas kids, dropped at Sabasset. So sometimes this could be students who are graduating. It could be students moving on to another school district, moving on to another, maybe not attending school. So those are some of the changes. Now, what's interesting is when we actually look at the number of students who are landing academically in the green and the yellow, remember, put those together, and that's about where our grad rates are. There's a few things that jump at us when we look at this data. One, when we look at this as an INED team, the low number of students who in Malahat are actually being successful and the high number of students that we're really seriously concerned about. The other data set that we're looking at is this Cowichan data set, that 55.6% of on-reserve students Cowichan are at risk. They are struggling. They need some supports. And also, you know, if you look at Staminas and Sabasset, really small data set to look at. But what I'm liking about this data, when you actually look at the spreadsheet, it is triggering conversations with our INED department, with schools. We're going out and not just saying, how are the kids doing? We're going saying, how is Johnny doing? We notice Johnny's in the red right now. What are you doing to better support that student? And if you're exhausting your efforts, what can we do as a district to support? Now, when we push all that data together, this is what I get, is a projection of potential grad rates moving forward. Penelakut, 56%, Malahat, 32%, Cowichan, 40%. Big concern. So what can we do, especially to support Malahat and Cowichan? And this is the data that has actually driven a lot of decisions that we're using here at the district office. And of course, the data doesn't paint the entire picture. It just gives us a snapshot of what's going on in the schools. But it does drive us forward into having conversation with schools to get the bigger story. What is actually happening with these students? So when we first pulled this together, we saw a few schools kind of rising to the top of schools that need some extra support. We need to be supporting them a little bit better. So that data set that I just shared with you last year led us to some conversations with Alexander, Coheman, Quamachin, and Cal High, as well as Francis Kelsey and George Bonner, but especially in the central zone here, when you look at the large number of on-reserve Cowichan students, it pointed us to needing to go have that conversation. We had that conversation about the street data, and that street data led us to, at the district level, having conversations about how do we better support, you've heard me say it before, those group of kids leaving Coheman and Alexander to Quamachin that are not reading for comprehension. So we had to address that. We pulled in district principal literacy, school-based literacy coordinators, literacy blocks at the high school. And now we're on the journey right now of creating a literacy plan and reviewing our assessments. So lots of important work that we're doing. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to pass it over to Darlene Crane to tell a little bit more of that part of the story. Thanks, Apka.
Thank you, Larry.
Squale, CM, not see yet. Good day, respected friends. Thank you for a few moments to share a bit more about this journey. Last spring, Robin took the opportunity and invited me over to spend some time with the leadership team to get some perspective and understanding of our district before we began the work this fall. And Larry shared with me some of this data and that moral imperative that just grew from the conversation and the vision of making some real impactful change and investment in our schools was really profound. So I was looking forward to that work, but I think it was early July, I got a quick phone call from Larry and he's like, Darlene, we really recognize that we need to make some early intervention to really support these learners so that we can ensure that they are reading for comprehension and ready to engage in learning. And so he tasked me, one of my first tasks was develop a job description for literacy coordinators that were to be embedded in the two schools, the Coheman and Alexander positions. So we spent some time over the summer really researching how these positions can be structured to have the most impact on student learning, and then consulted with both of the principals involved with those schools. And it gave me an opportunity to hear about the school cultures and what the schools needed with these positions. Both the principals really articulated, these are two beautiful schools that make our students feel welcome and loved and engaged. But they also recognized that they needed to make some shift with some literacy instructions. So together we developed job descriptions that really were positions that were embedded in the schools that were targeted to impacting classroom instruction and empowering teachers to make differentiated instruction. Recognizing that the students often come to school with such diverse needs, that it isn't always about making sure that they're reading on level by grade 3, but we can predict and be prepared for the fact that they need ongoing targeted instruction and learning all the way through to grade 7. And how do we build those supports and structures? So in consultation with the principals from those schools, Larry, Cheryl, Charlie with Indigenous Education, we drafted the 2 positions, posted the positions, and did some interview. And what we've done now is we've actually invited those 2 principals to share with you some insights into how that work has come to life and how it has impacted the teachers and learners in the schools. And within these positions, we're looking at instruction from tier 1, that good classroom rich instruction, through targeted interventions, and really coming up with some outside of the box structures that have been very innovative. So I hope you enjoy the 2 stories from our principals.
Right, well, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I thank you as well for the opportunity to share with you some of the learning and adventures and the journey that Cohuman has been on the last few months since we have added a literacy coordinator to our school. I think my goal is to use the term literacy coordinator, but you might find me using the name Lisa a few times because our coordinator is Lisa, and she has been a wonderful addition to our school. I'm going to just sort of speak to two very impactful ways that the coordinator has supported our work at Cohuman. And I think Larry's going to help me by, oh, there he is. He's going to be my Vanna. So the first way that our coordinators really helped us along is with our supporting or guiding our professional learning. And she's done this in three ways. One, she's been leading the way. The second way is she's been walking alongside us. And the third way is inviting us along. Larry. One of the great ways that Lisa has been able to help us is by leading our learning. And she has done that by being our resident expert and our in-house keeper of all the literacy research, learning. And she has a great passion for literacy that is absolutely infectious. So she has been leading our PLC sessions. She has been leading lunch sessions, after school sessions, meeting with teachers one-on-one, as you see in this first picture, and also working in groups. And she's spent a lot of time ensuring that every staff member on site has a strong understanding of how students learn to read. And that includes the research and the brain science, and has really made sure that we all are working on the same frame of reference and have a really strong understanding of what the critical components of reading are. The other thing that, I'm still back on that other one. She's also been able to walk with us. And because she is on staff here every day, she really is seen as a team member, and she has the influence that administrators don't always have with staff. And she has been able to connect with teachers in a variety of different ways. And she will go into a class and co-teach. She will go into a class and model a lesson. She will go into a class and support a teacher's work with students. And she does this with grace and makes in a way that is comfortable, welcomed, and so meaningful, because the outcome for our students is that they really benefit from the learning that the staff member has done. And if you look in the center picture, you'll see a teacher. She's in the back close to one of our new sound walls in our school, and the students are all crowded around her doing a learning lesson right at the wall. And what this has come from is Lisa's gone in and introduced the sound wall, done some co-teaching and some modeling, and now we have the classroom teacher leading that learning, and that transfer of learning has taken place. And then there's also a picture of a photocopier, because Lisa, they just have this ability to network and meet the needs of our classroom teachers wherever they are. So some teachers are ready to dive right in. Some teachers are started just stepping in, and then some are not quite ready yet. And our coordinator has really been helpful in meeting our teachers wherever they're ready to start. And I have included the picture of the photocopier because some great conversations for some gentle nudges and great invitations to partake in our journey have started here and in the hallway. So it just shows that the coordinator can be very responsive and really work with us wherever we are. And the invitations really need to continue to be taking place, because we all want to be participating in this journey as we move along. Larry. Pardon me. The second thing that has been very impactful for us is the work that Lisa, the coordinator, has done with us to co-create a roadmap for working with our students. She has helped us with where to start, which path to take, and our next steps. And we really needed to make a new roadmap and adjust the work that we had been doing. I'm just going to get Larry to move to that. There we go. So this is probably the biggest work that we have accomplished over the course of the year. And the big piece that we have started looking at this year is the assessments that we have been using to collect data about what our students can do as readers. And this involved looking at 4 brand new diagnostic assessments. And not only looking at them, but Lisa and our helped to teach us and model how we would use them, how to schedule it. So our whole school, we collected data on every student, how to interpret that data, and what we would do with that data when we had it. And it was a huge task, and it involved a lot of work and a lot of time. And you're looking at the bulletin board as this team is trying to, what's missing is the teachers and the staff that are looking at the bulletin board are all trying to map out this work and look at these assessments and figure out how we're going to make this work. And then once that data was collected, it was really, we have this data, now what are we going to do with it? Because it's great when we have this information, but if we don't know how we are going to work with our students to support those reading deficits and make the changes and that is going to help them be successful, we're not going to make the gains that we need. So she's really helped us to develop a lot of high leverage activities, provided with us with materials and resources, and is making sure that we are working at each of the tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 with our students in ways that is meaningful and is going to yield us a lot of positive gains and a lot of growth. And then we're looking at the last picture, which is kind of funny because I just realized just before we're about to begin that it's cut off the side parts, which shows the students and the other teacher that are working here. But as the big work I feel ahead of us is really looking at next steps. How are we creating these structures that are going to be long lasting and help us to continue to maintain the momentum that we have established so far? And this is a picture of a classroom. And right now there's actually learners on the full class, but we have 2 teachers that are working in the class, providing some targeted work while the other learners are working in small groups and able to do their work independently on tasks that are meeting their needs and what they need to do. And it's really when we've done this targeted work and we've collected this information, how are we going to make sure that the structures that we have within our classes are going to continue to allow the great work that we are doing, and how are we going to make sure that we are moving forward and maintaining the momentum we have. And then just as we're, I've been reflecting on this the last week and talking with staff and some of our students, we really wanted to highlight that we really are making some progress, feeling the growth and starting to see the success. I have a picture in the top left corner of a gentleman that seems to be running uphill, and we're actually feeling like we're moving uphill, and it's not at a crawl. We're actually beginning to feel like we're seeing success. If Larry moves to the next slide. That progress is there, and there's Lisa working with a group of our students, and behind those masks, I don't know if you can see that the children are smiling with their eyes, but they're really starting, just the sense of pride and the beaming in our students is more and more evident. And even Lisa's worked with our Indigenous education team, our EAs, our classroom teachers, and everybody, the conversation is alive, and we're all starting to feel that progress. And then in the second picture, you'll see this is a sort of a mess of all the assessments that we're working on and using, but we're really excited because we're about to do some progress monitoring and really looking forward to see what that quantitative growth is over the course of the year. And then this last picture again is just one of our success stories. Here's one of our friends at school who has had a bit of a bumpy start to the school year, but he is now a reader, and he is popping in to get extra books. He is so excited. His confidence, his shoulders, like everything about him has changed. And of course, his engagement in his learning and in the class has also changed for the better, which is also changing some of his behaviors at school to be more positive. So just all around, we're starting to really feel that success and really team.
Thank you, Jen.
That's good, Jen. Danny.
It's my turn. Thanks, Larry. Squale, Antha Danny. I'm the principal of Alexander, and I can only see like 6 or 7 people on the side, and I'm very grateful that the ones I can see there are like super friendly faces, because my heart rate is like really high right now. I just looked at my watch. So thank you. And thanks, Jen, for being an awesome lead-in. And just that mention that Jen said about the professional learning piece, I have, like Larry said, I have just some stories to supplement and complement the data that Larry showed. So every Monday, or actually it's every Sunday night, I send out a little Monday memo about what's coming up in the week. And I think it was back in October, the first PLC that we had was right around that time when COVID was sort of re-insisting that we have smaller groups and we don't have too many in-person meetings with too many different people in one space. So we did a bit of brainstorming and we realized we really, because of the number of staff we have between EAs and teachers, we really needed to separate everybody. So we have 3 different learning topics for the first 3 PLCs. One of them was going to be literacy with Amy. You can see here, Kelly and Claudia from our Indigenous education team were going to lead a group of teachers and EAs through Indigenous ways of learning. And myself and the vice principal were going to review our wolf pack. And at that first Monday memo that got sent out, I took off the teachers' names on who was in group A, B, and C. But the feedback that I got, like, what do you mean? I want to start with Amy's group. Well, we don't have enough space for everyone to start with Amy's group. So that's our literacy coordinator. I'm going to do the same thing Jen did and accidentally keep saying her name instead of her job title. So we had a big sort of, I wouldn't call it a fight, but we had different groups of teachers who really, really wanted to start with Amy, and we had to, make decisions. And then the following PLC, a couple teachers were going to be away and they were going to miss Amy's group. So they were away for Amy's group. Well, I don't want to, can I just skip one of these other PLCs and go back to Amy's group? And I found it fascinating because Amy was spending, 90 minutes to 2 hours talking with teachers about different learning, like literacy learning has changed over the years. So she was pushing their thinking, giving them an opportunity to think about changing their practice. And that was a hard topic. Whereas the other 2 topics were more discussion based and things that we all feel and felt comfortable with. So I was really taken aback at how passionate people were to get to, go into Amy's group, to do the harder learning. And on the last PLC, we had between Amy, who was sick, a couple teachers who were sick, a couple EAs who were off for whatever reason, there was only about 2 people in the building who still needed to go to Amy's group. And we had to pivot that day because Amy wasn't present. And the disappointment that those staff members had for missing out on Amy's group was shocking to me, because most often when you have to pivot, it's okay, you can pivot. And they were tremendously disappointed that they had to miss that literacy PLC with Amy. So Larry, if you can switch to the next, it's another example, a little story about some professional learning. So this is an email that was sent to Amy from one of our teachers, and the title of the email was "It's Your Fault." And she is a teacher who, has been teaching for quite some time, and like we all do, felt as though we knew things about what we were teaching. And now she is spending her weekends deep diving into the information that our coordinator has been sharing about, new ways of thinking around literacy. So when I was asking our coordinator, for some little stories or anecdotes about how things were going and what she's really noticed, this is what she shared with me. So it's just another example of the teachers here are not just participating, but they're enthusiastically buying in. And then Larry, I'd like you to flip the slide. We have a photo next. And there's a lot happening in this photo. So the first thing, the girl that you can see closest to us with the short hair and the blue hoodie, she has not attended very much school because of COVID. And she is now in grade 3. So she missed much of grade 2 last year and half of grade 1 the year before. But in the last couple of weeks, she's come back. Her and her sister are both, rejoined the Wolfpack. And because of the things that the classroom teacher has learned from Amy about literacy and teaching the kids the different ways to teach them and engage with them around learning to read and sounds and the letters. She, even though has missed so much school, is able to confidently sit there and practice with that girl sitting beside her whose face you can't see, but you can see like a little French braid and a red hair tie. That's one of our students who has special needs, and she, you know, hasn't engaged in learning reading until now because of a variety of challenges that she has around her learning. But she can sit with the teacher. She can identify her letters now. She is making some sounds and blending them together. And the teacher here, that's Amanda, she is a new teacher. And at the beginning of this year, she worked really closely with Amy and watched Amy and, you know, taught alongside Amy, or sorry, our literacy coordinator. And now she has, by February, come to the table with enough knowledge and confidence to do it on her own. So she no longer needs our coordinator in the room with her or helping her or holding her hand, like metaphorically holding her hand through the process. She's got the skills and she has the capacity to do this targeted intervention with students in her class while, well, you can't see it in the photo, behind her, other students are doing other things to do with literacy on their own and independently. And then we just have one more little story. Next photo, Larry. This is a grade 7 boy. And what we've noticed is the work that our coordinator is doing with our staff, our teachers and our EAs is actually trickling out into more spaces than just classrooms. So this is a boy, this is my office. And he, you know, I don't even remember why he was here, but we have come to a new way of being where when students are here with me in my office, quite often we will use a literacy strategy to, you know, not talk about whatever they needed to come here for, and just to practice. And this fellow here, he was coming to practice his reading, and our Indigenous education teacher, Kelly, gave me some Indigenous-based readers, like primary readers, to like very simple ones to practice. And he was practicing, and I am not a primary reading teacher. I have never ever formally learned how to teach somebody how to read, you know, but I was doing my best. And I have learned just from walking through the hallways and popping into classrooms from Amy. There's this little book that he will sometimes read, and it is about a bald eagle. And as this young man would, you know, try and read the words, he would pronounce eagle legal. And I've learned, like, we're sitting at the desk like this, I have learned from Amy that I sometimes need to pull my mask down and point to my lips. I never knew before, you know, this last year, the shape of your mouth, it really does influence and impact your ability to read and understand and say words. So I've learned to pull my mask down and say, you know, like eagle, and the kids start to do it as well. So even though literacy is happening in classrooms, obviously, it's now trickling out into like our ADST classes, applied design skill technology classes, work just coming to the office to hang out in the office. It's all having literacy sort of seep into life at Alexander, which is really quite delightful. And it's learning for all of us. Like Jen was saying, that professional learning piece has really impacted the way that we are doing things here at Alexander. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Danny. Darlene.
Yes, thank you. I knew it would be very, very difficult to follow those two with the amazing stories of what's happening. But we wanted to take just a moment to show you the interconnected, that the district was responsive to the student needs and the needs in these schools with these positions. but it really has also created a very reciprocal relationships. One of the joys of my position this year has been working directly with these two coordinators. So every Friday afternoon since the beginning of the year, I meet with them and we spend time talking about their observations in the schools, the data, what to do next. I think at times they may have wished I was a little bit more explicit and told them what assessments to use, but I'd kind of give them a few choices to go try, because what's happened is they go into the schools, they're trying the different assessments, trying the different instructional practices, and then coming back. And then that's given us feedback that we can use with our development of our literacy assessments and our framework. Danny had the picture of the teacher at the table with the two students and that she was telling that story. That was actually the West Virginia explicit phonics lessons, which are targeted intervention lessons that Amy and I have worked together. Amy took that into the classroom, modeled it, and now teachers across our district are using it. But because of the work at Alexander, those teachers are able to answer questions at other schools and give feedback on how that we can help other teachers use those resources. So this has been not just impactful to those schools, but really a very reciprocal relationship back to us and informing the work that we're doing at the district level as well. And Larry, if you go ahead and go to the next slide. We wanted to share with you just a quick highlight of this is, and we shared when I visited with you last time that we're re-envisioning our literacy assessments and the frameworks in those pieces. While Larry shared with you the red, yellow, and green from the Indigenous lens, we wanted you to get a sneak peek of what the really targeted data we'll get from those assessments next fall. We'll be able to identify with every learner in every school in our district exactly where their skills are growing and have that checkpoint on their phonemic awareness, their segmenting, their diagraphs, all of those really finite skills at the primary levels. But then we're going to be able to diagnose and target those in every school and provide that support. So again, we've really had that opportunity to learn from the work in these two schools. But I also wanted to highlight a little bit, while these schools had the targeted intervention, literacy coordinators in the schools, we've really been very thoughtful about each school and making sure they have the supports that are layered in based on their needs. And, George Bonner is another school that is really in that data that Larry showed you. And so while their needs aren't quite the same as Alexander and Coheman, we've layered in a different level with a coordinator that's with them every week, more targeted in service for the teachers there. So we're really working together to be responsive for both the schools and the students. And we certainly are most appreciative of the insights of the senior management team and the trustees to really make this investment that has impacted the students, the teachers in those schools, but also our district as a whole. So hi, Sepka, to you. And I know Larry's got a few more great examples of the work that's happening.
Hi, Chika, Darlene. And I'm just looking at the time. We are over our 30 minutes. I'm going to go super fast. I just talked briefly about our Swallup Soughton. Swallup is plural for Soughton. That's how you say more than one Soughton. So we've been on a journey with the Swallup Soughton. I've talked about them briefly before. We looked at transition data, identified some schools in the central zone that could really benefit from some additional support. So I'm going to go quickly through this. Phase one was in 2021 when we brought in those four, one at grade 7 to help the transition to grade 8, one in grade 9 to help the transition to grade 10, and then grade 10 and 11 to assist with the graduation. In phase 2, we brought in some additional Soughtons to kind of fill the gap a little bit. So then we had grade 7 through 11. I'm really happy to announce, with a little bit extra dollars we had in our INED budget, effective last Friday, we now have our Soughton positions starting in grade 6 this year, that'll become grade 7 next year, all the way to grade 11. Now, keep in mind, they're all going to transition forward. So we'll have Soughton positions grade 7 right through 12 starting next September. And that's really exciting to help with those transitions, again, between elementary Quamachin to Cal High. Our grade 8s, we have got a buddy program right now going on. That's with Francine Thomas. Grade 8s are working with grade 2s. So that buddy cohort at Coheman and Alexander are coming back and working with the grade 2s, allowing that out. And that's the next cohort. When Francine gets to grade 12 and those kids graduate, she'll be coming right back to that group of kids. So we're expanding that buddy program to all of our Southern positions. For example, the grade 7s this year will be working with the grade 1s for this year, and then following that group moving forward. So quite exciting. So that basically our Southern support is expanding for grade 1 right through grade 12. Those students, those families are getting the support that they need. I'm also excited to announce a partnership between Indigenous education and early learning with Brenda Lee. We're creating a Southern early learning childhood educator. Posting is out. We're trying to find somebody internally. That should come into play hopefully by spring break. So that'll be working with students from infants, babies, right up until kindergarten into grade 1, helping that transition from early years into kindergarten, and then from kindergarten to grade 1, ensuring supports. So just so excited. Our Southern program by spring break will then be a program that'll be supporting kids from cradle right through to graduation. Super excited. So helping those transitions, especially in the central zone here. And I'm going to pass it back to Danny for a quick story about one of her learners and how he's been a part or becoming a part of this Southern program. Danny, to close.
Forgot about this part, sorry. So this is a boy, Maverick. He's been in school since grade 2. He came to Alexander, and I was at like the principal of Alexander in grade 2. He's in grade 7 now. This picture was taken when he was at the very end of grade 5, I think. No, very end of grade 6 last year. And we worked very closely together, Maverick and I, over the last 6 years because, you know, Maverick has a lot of challenges in life, and he's gone from class to class, which is a new teacher every year, but I've been at Alexander for the whole time that he's been here. So I feel like it was right before Christmas, I was sitting down with Maverick and his mom, and April, our Southern, joined us. And in that conversation, when we were talking about, you know, I support around something specific that April was going to sort of take over from me in, I realized, and I was able to share with the family, that April will be like the new Mrs. Morrow. So Maverick, I've been the constant in Maverick's life because he goes through different classroom and different teacher every year, but I've been there for those 6 years. And I said to Mav and his mom, April will be with you all the way up until grade 12. So your new person is April. And we sort of like made a very, very informal, funny moment of like passing the torch on to April. So Mav and his family have that one person that's going to be with them throughout the rest of his schooling years, all the way till grade 12.
All right, Heights got Danny, and I'll just close by saying Heights Apka CM this yeah. We are very excited about this. You've heard about 2 programs that hopefully will have a positive impact on closing that Indigenous student achievement gap. So Heights Apka again.
Thank you, everyone. Joe Thorne had his hand up. I don't see Joe here anymore. Oh, there he is, Joe. You had your hand up. You have a question, comment?
Yeah, just a comment. It's clear that in everybody's presentation that from kindergarten to grade 4, everybody is the same. They're hungry, they're reading. Grade 5 is when our people start changing. That's when they realize there's a difference in attitude, there's a difference in learning capabilities, because the teaching changes. And that's where the problem is. If you can pick it up from grade 5 to grade 7 or grade 8, then you're going to have a good turnaround. I know you may not understand, but if you think about Reserve being what we call the ghetto, we're different. Our attitudes are different in the house, in the playfield, and fashion, we're behind. Technology is confusing to us. But literacy reading is one of the key things that just gets lost because of new technology. So I get kind of worried. And that's when we start noticing the difference. Kids will start leaving school grade 7, grade 8 because they want to make money. They want changes. So I don't know if that makes any sense, Larry, but I'm just telling you the way I see it every day and I hear it every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Thorne. I have a question. I'm not sure who best to answer this, but first of all, incredible presentation. And it's pretty exciting to see. It's very exciting to see what's happening. But where did you, first of all, find the Amy's and the Lisas? We have two literacy coordinators. Where did you find them? Are they from our staff?
Yeah, so Amy actually came right out of, she was an LA and librarian, LA teacher, librarian teacher at Alexander, very fortunate. And also Lisa is a teacher who's had a passion for literacy for years and done a lot of work and came from Drinkwater and then transitioned to Coheman in that role temporarily for this year. Yeah, yeah. So both internal candidates have been great. Yeah.
And besides PLC time, is there any release time we provide the staff at Alexander or Coheman to have them like take an afternoon with Lisa or Amy, or is it all done in classroom, in school time, at the lunchroom or whatever? Is there release time to support this training or education of our teachers? Danny?
I'm just going to jump in and answer on Larry and Darlene's behalf. But we're very, very lucky that Amy, or our coordinator, Amy, works with teachers on their breaks, like their non-instructional time and at lunchtime, and she just grabs them here and there. But there was, in the fall, one or two teachers who Amy just could not figure out how to sit down with and just sort of get the ball rolling. And we emailed Darlene and said, like, can we get a half day? And she said yes. So we've had a little bit of both.
And my third question is, what happens to these positions next year? Darlene?
We don't know at this point. I believe that you and the senior management team are certainly beginning your budget journey. We certainly see the need and hope for the opportunity, but we are making, not that Larry's asked yet, but I did do some work this weekend sort of outlining a plan for next fall so that we can, if we have the support, how we'll utilize it. And if we don't have support, what the contingency plan will be, because we do need to keep this work moving forward.
Thank you. Trustee Croft.
Thank you. It's a marvelous example of improving literacy, but I think it's also a fabulous example of how professional development reaches through the organization and touches so many people. So thank you for that. Bearing in mind that, my way of understanding a situation is both through data and stories. So I'm so grateful for the stories that you offered today. And I think we are all looking forward to success. When do you think the data might begin to show that success or show the impact?
Hopefully soon, as we come out of this pandemic. Right now, we're working in the Indigenous Education Department, trying to come up with ideas and strategies on how to get our Indigenous learners back to school, all of them back to school and engaging. There's a message that I think is on Facebook right now from our district elder, Dolly, telling families it's safe, it's time to come back. And that's some work we'll be doing with our principals. Just to reinforce that message. So I'm fingers crossed, we'll start to see the results of this as early as next year. Like you heard the conversation about a grade 7 student is learning to read. Like this is impactful. This is lifelong impact, right? Positive impact on these students.
Trustee Doman and Trustee Croft. Trustee Doman, your mic's not on. Trustee Doman, your mic's not on.
No. Do we have literacy coordinators at all our schools? And do we need them at all our schools? And my second question is to Larry. Those kids in green who are graduating, how many of those are soaring over that green line versus just getting over it?
Larry, you want to
Let-
answer the second question first, and then I'll go to Darlene to answer the first one.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, good question, Randy. So here's an interesting stat that I pulled out last year as I was diving deep into this. We talk about the grad rates of our Indigenous learners hovering in the on reserve around 40%, off reserve around that 70%. Of our Indigenous grads, those that continue on to post-secondary, we have more continuing to post-secondary and being successful as Indigenous learners as a percentage compared to non-Indigenous. If they can graduate, there's a 65% chance they're going to go off and be successful at post-secondary. So are they soaring above? I'm going to make some assumptions there that they're successful enough that they're ready to transition and be successful at post-secondary. So yeah, it was quite a positive stat to see. If we can get the students graduated, there's a great chance that they're going to continue on with their education beyond high school. Yeah. Darlene.
Darlene?
Trustee Doan, that was a great question about how to do this work in all of our schools. We currently do not have literacy coordinators in all schools, but we have asked all principals and vice principals to identify a literacy lead in every school. And we've done that intentionally so that as we move forward, principals aren't carrying this load alone, but they've got a teacher partner to move forward. And so we've done some very specific in-service to empower that partnership between the administrator and the literacy lead to then move forward. So that's in place now, and we're going to expand on that next year.
If I may, just a follow-up question. Darlene, this model that we have, which is obviously an exceptional model, is it made in Cowichan, or is this a model that is being seen elsewhere? I personally have never seen such targeted human resources put at a single challenge to overcome, and obviously the benefits both for the children as well as the teaching staff as a whole. So is this new, or is this has this been done somewhere else?
It's been done in other places, not quite as well as Cowichan's doing it right now, but it's similar in other places, but this was much more intense focus. And I would say the job descriptions here were much more thorough and well thought out as far as the connection to the targeted work in the school and then the link back to the district. I, as a principal, had a similar position in my school. And so it's part of my excitement, but then it also helped us really formulate a slightly stronger, not that I'm biased, but so we took some good ideas and made it a little bit stronger here.
Trustee Croft, and then Larry can respond, and then Trustee Dolan.
Thank you. You mentioned that there was some outreach to the families regarding it being safe to come back to school and that kind of thing. Does outreach to the student families play a part in this literacy effort? It wasn't mentioned, but is it to come, or is it happening?
Yeah, good question, Elizabeth. We are when we talk about the literacy initiative, we talked about our district literacy school-based positions. We've also got coordinators here at the board office that are helping to push this out beyond just those schools. Like, we're trying to reach out to more than those schools. In fact, when the data just tells us a little picture and pushes us in a direction. So when we saw Malahat Nation, some struggling learners there, we looked at, well, what schools are we talking about? And we pushed one of our coordinators for extra support down at George Bonner as an example. Like, the data just tells a picture, right? Like I said earlier. But what it is telling us is we need to give the tools to the teachers to better support the learners. And then when we looked at where are the schools that most of these students are landing, Coheman, Alexander, George Bonner, Quamachin, Cal High, that's where a lot of these students are landing. Like, when I say a lot, I'm talking 90 to 95% of these students are landing in those schools. So how do we better support those schools? That's how some decisions were made around that. Yeah.
Darlene, and then Trustee Doman.
I'll just add a little bit for the outreach for the parent part. We do recognize that parents and families as partners in this journey is absolutely critical. So we currently have drafted a sort of a parent video that updates our parents on the literacy work. I worked with both Dolly and Mary Peter in Indigenous Education to make sure that video would be accessible by all of our families and be welcomed in. And so following up that introductory video, we're going to do a series of videos that talks a little bit about those 5 critical elements and things families can do at home that are fun and engaging, and that they can do to help promote and support the literacy work as well. And the other part of that is our new literacy assessments next year. We're looking at how can we directly tie those assessments and that snapshot of student learning back to communication to families, so we can show them where their learners are in this journey.
And
okay, go ahead, Larry. Trustee Doman's being patient, but go ahead.
thanks, Rob. I just want to finish that. Darlene touched on it. Our end goal with this literacy initiative is it's not just literacy coordinators supporting, it's not just classroom teachers. We'd also like to get our Indigenous ed staff the training to support. To really have an impact, we all need to embrace this. Like Danny said, kid walks into her office. Hey, let's do some literacy, right? Let's get everybody some training. So to the outreach teachers, our outreach teachers are walking alongside our literacy teachers at our high school, at Quamachin, and our elementary schools to learn the skills as well. So every time they're meeting up with these students, if they need those interventions, they're getting those interventions. So yes. Thanks. Sorry, Rob.
No problem. Trustee Doman.
So is there going to be an ask for more money for these literacy programs for other schools? Are we going to have to put more money in the budget this year for it?
I think we're formulating a plan right now that is meeting the needs of the district. And we're right now kind of working through, like Darlene said, what's the plan moving forward? The end plan shouldn't be having coordinators in all the districts. And it's to empower the teachers in the classrooms so they've got the tools to be able to meet the needs of the learners. And I think we're on that journey. I think as we, over the next month or so, month and a half, we'll be further formulating that plan and assessing where are our needs moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, all of you. This is a life-changing process that you're undertaking, and we thank you for that. Incredible. Larry Madden, you're still at Performing Arts.
Yeah, sorry guys, you get a double dose of me tonight. I'll try to go through this one really quickly. Okay, now let's see if the share screen lets me see you this time. Screen to PowerPoint.
Larry?
I lost you again. Yep.
Can I help you in this?
It usually works for me, but I just upgraded my PowerPoint.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a presentation, but the briefing note was so good. And,
okay.
But I was just going to say, are there any questions of the trustees of you? Because unless they need to see the presentation, can you raise your hand, trustee, if you need to see the presentation? Larry, do you need to give it?
If you're good with the briefing note, I'm good. You give me a mic, I'll talk all night, Rob. But I don't have to.
Trustee Doman, do you have a question on the briefing note? Your mic's off, Randy.
Yeah, do we have a particular teacher or group of people who have the ability to do this?
Yeah, good question. If you notice underneath, well, you won't see it there, but in the presentation, there's a fleet of different, looking at dance, for example, that these students are doing at a high level. We might have a teacher that can do tap and jazz and hip hop. I'd say the odds are pretty slim. So that's why we've partnered with Adage to provide those teaching opportunities. Yeah, there are dance teachers I think Cal High's got a dance teacher, Quamachin's got a dance teacher. Are they professionally trained to the level of Adage instructors? I would say unlikely. I know that one of the teachers that was at Francis Kelsey, her background was Highland dancing, and she was the dance instructor for all of the different dances. So,
Trustee Kemner?
Just have a question. The $325 a month, Is that inclusive of all the dance, voice, whatever lessons, or will people be charged more if once they're in?
So that'll get them a half a day, 5 days a week of dance, and or you can see there's other options, musical theater, rock band. It'll give them a half a day for the whole 5 days a week for the whole year. There are some students, to answer your question, there are some students who say, well, I'm going to do an additional class at 4:30 too. Well, some of them do that, expand out and do more than just the, what would it be, 15 hours a week of dance. Some of them are doing upwards to 20, 25. And that'll cost an extra cost, anything that happens outside the school day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions of the trustees? So there is a motion. Jason, can you show us the motion on page 12? Trustee Spilsbury, your microphone is on or off.
I just moved the motion that the Board Education and Business Committee recommends to the Board of Education approval of establishing a Performing Arts Academy at Cowichan Open School and authorizes the fees at $325 per month or $3,250 per year.
Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Kimler? Any discussion? See no hands up. All those, oh, sorry, Trustee Kimler?
It's just a request, actually. Can you, since we missed your presentation, email it to us, please? Thank you.
That makes Thank you, Trustee. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Larry, I apologize I cut you off, but.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. You don't need to hear from me for 50 minutes in one night. 40 is enough.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right.
Moving on to business and operations, page 14 of your agenda. Mr. Sanquist.
Thank you. We do have a fair bit of financial information this evening as we begin budget planning. First thing, my apologies, the document I put in the package had a formula error in it in regards to the projection. So I'm going to share a slightly different version of it for the committee. So looking forward to looking forward to June 30th, as at January 31st, 2022, we're beginning to narrow in on where we think our year end's going to land. Right now in revenues, we are above budget. We are above budget by $321,000 on international program fees, and that is $621,000 above where we were in our annual budget last year. So some good news there, and most of the miscellaneous revenue that we're over budget on as well is associated with that program and registration fees. We're also appearing to be over budget on rentals as we have leased out one of our facilities to the Francophone Authority, and that's providing some additional revenue. Going down into salaries, principal, vice principals, forecasting within $29,000 of budget, under budget. Teachers right now within $88,000 of budget. That's extremely close on teachers, and it's probably subject to some more variation before the end of the year. Showing a fair bit under on education assistants and clerical noon hours. So there's approximately $400,000+ in there. And a little bit over on exempt staff salaries at the moment. An area where the board has put another $150,000 is in casual replacements. Right now that's showing, if all the trends continue, at being under by about 84,000, but we're not through February, and February is typically our greatest month of absenteeism. And so that's an account we still need to be paying attention to. And when you're under budget in salaries, you're usually under budget in benefits. And we're looking to be right now at $295,000 under budget in benefits on a $15 million budget. So those are adding towards the surplus. And where I had to make an adjustment was utilities. So we've already increased this budget by $150,000, and that was done in the annual budget due to increased hydro. And that's predominantly related to the heating and ventilation, the ventilation work that's had to occur as a response to COVID. So increased airflow and increased filtration. Even with that 150,000, I think we're going to be over by close to 179. So really that's over $300,000, or in other words, we probably eliminated most of the energy savings that we had put in place over the last number of years when we had an energy manager by having to reverse those for the increased airflow. So what that all adds up to is trending towards a surplus of about 1.2 million at this time. We're only really at the halfway point on the school year. We get better at those estimates as we get closer to the end of the year. But right now, at least it's showing heading in the right direction. And those would be funds that would be accessible in next year's budget planning. So that's the story on projection. And if there's any questions, I'll just quickly look around the screen. Don't see any hands. I'm going to move on to enrollment because that's another big piece of our budget planning. So just be one moment. I need to share my screen in a different way. Hit into the agenda. Okay. Now, when it comes to enrollment, we always say we don't have a crystal ball, but we have been in a lot of conversations with Beauregard, the board's demographers. You subscribe to Beauregard's demographics, and what Beauregard factor are, they're very sophisticated in their projections. They look at, to start with, when they're looking at birth rates, they're looking at the postal codes of the parents of the children where they're born. So it's not necessarily you were born in the Cowichan Valley, but maybe you were born in Victoria or Nanaimo Hospital, but you live here. So they have that ability to differentiate that data on birth rates. They also look at in-migration patterns and out-migration patterns. So we know our community is growing. So they are assuming about 2 to 3% of in-migration growth. And we also know that we don't transition every student from grade to grade. And so they factor that in as well. And so when we look at all those factors on our school age enrollment, we're estimating a relatively modest increase next year of about 49. The ministry, we're estimating that we would go up by 31. So we're showing a little bit better than the ministry's demographers. And then moving into the 2023, 2024, we see another 105. And then, which is more than the ministry had. And then we begin to stabilize a little bit. The ministry has us going by 29, and we have us down by 12. And the reason for that, and I'll get into that more in my other budget report, but birth rates peaked in 2017, and the 2020 birth rate data that the demographers have as the last source is actually the lowest it's been since 2007. And I'll show you the cohorts as we move a little bit further into my next presentation. But it does appear to be beginning to stabilize the enrollment in our community. So one of the areas that we did have to make adjustments was the February and May counts. So I'm going to use a figure of that we're actually going to go up by about 36 next year. And the reason for that is a more strict application of the enrollment rules around K-9 DL. If a student's been claimed in September, we can't claim them again in February or May as we have in the past. So this has been submitted to the ministry. If we get new information along the way, we can adjust in budget. We'll be asked to update it again around the end of June, but wanted you to be aware of what we have already submitted for the district. So I'll stop that share. And if there's no questions, I'm going to move into the big report. This is what we're working on for budget for next year. And we'll get more into enrollment, and I'll show you how some of this is trending here, if that's okay.
Thank you, Jason. I just have one question. Is there a specific area where that growth is occurring? I mean, Fiona mentioned earlier about growth in Lake Cowichan. Is that where the growth is in our district, or South End or North End? Or?
Yeah, when we look through the Beauregard projection, this would be a great board planning session to actually look at some of this demographic data that they have, because it is broken out by catchment. It's that specific. And it does look at the, the environmental scan that the board had done as well has been factored in. So there are areas. I think Lake Cowichan is definitely an area on the grow that is growing. Fiona mentioned it. And the Beauregard data from parents who have filed child tax credits suggests there's another really big kindergarten class coming. So that's one area for sure to be watching, and we see that trending out over time in that community. Maple Bay is another area that we do see a lot of development, as we do up towards the Tanzer as well. So those are a couple of areas. Mill Bay is one to watch. Although right now the birth rate data doesn't suggest for the next 5 years that we have a boom of children. It will show those elementary schools start to go down unless there is in-migration beyond that 2 and 3%. So if there's a building boom that happens there, we'll need to readjust. But right now, that's not suggesting that area is exploding with children. These enrollment projections are actually indicating that we're going up by about 101 in elementary next year. So that's still growing, but you're going to see in another slide that our grade 12s are a little bit bigger than the students that are coming in. And you're also going to see that this year's grade 7 is actually the board's smallest cohort. So as they move forward into some of the secondary schools, for instance, Quamachin should see a reduction in enrollment just simply because the grade 7 cohort is so small and the grade 9 cohort currently is so big. So as that shifts, that's got a bit of an effect. So it's really fascinating demographic information to look deeply into. So onto my report. So here we are beginning to plan for the 2022-2023 annual budget. And we know that that's the district's plan that sets into place all of the strategic priorities. And so what we're doing right now is we're setting those priorities. We projected student enrollment. We're looking at some of the costs that we have now and projecting them into next year. And I'll get into those in a little more detail. Things are going to change based on the number of students, contract changes, one-time items. We're looking at projecting revenues, where we have rentals, interest, international fees, the grant. And we're identifying strategies and options to look at that to identify the net budget position. We're reviewing the budget against the board's strategic plan, and then we'll be looking to finalize decisions. So this part's all just my legal mumbo jumbo, which basically says we have to file a budget and it has to be done by June 30th, and it will be for our fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. So here's the enrollment as we look at it on a grade by grade level. So when I mentioned that our grade 7s are now next year's grade 8s, you can see that that's the lowest number in the district. And when I mentioned that our grade 12s are a little bit bigger than the cohorts coming in, you can see that here as well. So that's why the enrollment isn't necessarily going to take off unless we get some in-migration, people moving here. And for that to happen, there needs to be a number of factors, employment, housing, et cetera, in place. But it is showing that, our secondary grades are certainly larger now. I'd already talked about we're using a net increase of 36 FTE, and then enrollment is expected to go up again by 105 FTE next year. So here's sort of looking out across where we've been. We started to decline to about 2014, 2015. We began to bounce back pretty quickly. And here we are now with this light green bar. This is still projected because we don't have the February and May counts in. And then it just kind of goes up a bit and sort of hovers there if you look at the Beauregard data. So it's starting to show a bit of a period of stabilization, and that's even with 2 and 3% in migration growth. As we move down to unique student needs, a lot's been happening here around designations, in particular level 2s, the green bar. You'll see how that has significantly increased. Now, this trend line here is a combination of all students identified with unique student needs that qualify for funding in levels 1, 2, or 3. So you can see it just really took off around 2015-16. And here it is beginning to somewhat stabilize. And that's an important trend to be watching as the board does invest about between 50 and 60% more than the funding that's generated, depending on the school year. So another area that's really growing. As we look through our expenditures into next year's budget, we have funded and unfunded items. So we're in a relatively a period of unknown around wages right now. We have bargaining, which is beginning and concluding with teachers and USW and CUPE, and in all three we have no provincial framework around what those wage increases are going to be at this time. And I'm not sure we will by the time we conclude budgeting. We may be directed to budget with no increases for those employee groups because we don't have the revenue yet to offset that. So what we hope is that when those are settled, that government does fund those adequately, but we know that funding for wage increases is done on a system-wide basis and allocated more on FTE than it is on actual costs. And you can be winners and losers, and sometimes we don't win on those calculations. So that's something for us to be watching. Not funded next year, principals, vice principals, exempt staff, they've been eligible, I shouldn't say entitled, they've been eligible for compensation increases that align usually with the teachers. So not knowing what that teacher amount might be, we still need to be thinking about how to fund increases for that group because they're not funded by government. The average teacher salary costs, that moves around a fair bit. That's resulted in, I put in a note in here that when we restored the teacher collective agreement language a number of years ago, that resulted in a lot of new hires who aren't at the top of their pay band. There's a 10-step process for teachers. And as they move through, that typically costs between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. We don't know what absenteeism will look like. Pre-pandemic levels, we're way beyond those right now. Obviously, everybody's told to stay home if you're sick, and that costs money. What will it look like next year? And we know candidate pension premiums are going up, as are WorkSafe. So when I talk about WorkSafe, it's the base rate, but even though we've had better than our past demerit claims, we're still going to see an increase in that area. And here's a big one. Every 4 years, the school district holds an election to fill its 7 trustee seats. That's not funded, and usually that election costs around $100,000. So that's an item that needs to be put into this budget and not forgotten. We talked a bit about enrollment. You asked about some areas that were growing. We are currently looking at whether or not portables are required. And those usually cost around $200,000 a unit to procure. So we've been looking at the elementary schools and potentially Francis Kelsey as areas where there's some pressure right now on space. And there's a multi-year upgrade to financial procurement and human resources and payroll software underway. There's choices where that funding can come from as well, local capital or the operating budget. And pandemic considerations, what's it going to look like next year? We didn't think it was going to look like much this year, but should the board be considering a contingency for those for something there in the event that there's still some expectation around the ventilation, which results in utilities, or around the cleaning, for instance. But in the past, the boards, for the last couple of years, the boards received some pretty significant funding, and I wouldn't expect that would be continuing for those. It was brought up by Trustee Doman, will there be a budget pressure for literacy initiatives? So I've made a note here. Early learning and literacy initiatives continue to be significant priorities of the district. So I expect that the educational leaders will be bringing proposals in those areas into the budget process. And childcare, I think I saw today that the Ministry of Education is now called the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So I think they've officially changed their name, and I can see from the budget announcement today that there's a significant amount of funding coming into that area, and it's linked into school districts. We talk every year about a number of trades position and trying to make sure we have that right balance between operating and capital work, and we'll continue to need to have those conversations. And last year we had this item on here. We talked about, should we be funding all elementary schools equally? Some have different financial communities, and maybe that's an area we need to be looking at. And then, of course, reconciliation with local nations has always been important, and it's one of the priorities in the strategic priority. Savings, is there any money that we know is going to go away? I don't think so. Right now, what we have is we've increased 2 areas that we thought might be temporary. One was absenteeism, but it's showing that we're going to spend that probably this year, and the other was utilities. And I've just shown you that I think we're going to be over on that area. And if we continue with the ventilation that we have in place, we may need to leave those in place, but something to be looking at. Looking at our grants, of course, they're tied to the number of students. I heard today that we should expect to receive that around March 11th, not the 15th, as far as the actual grant date. Kind of unofficially, that's the date they're going to hope to try to get that out, because a lot of districts have spring break starting that next week. But provincially, there's an increase of 5,000 to 7,000 students projected in the next 5 years. And I saw those funds in the budget information that came out today. So the ministry is planning for increased funding to accommodate those students. I was a little worried that they may be doing that within the envelope. And ongoing grants, there's the pay equity grant and the bus grant, and all indications are that those will still be there. Under international student program, they're getting close to their capacity given the number of homestays in the district. So we'll likely be able to make some adjustments to that budget. Going into surplus, this year's budget actually ended up being balanced using, and I shouldn't say just, but it was a lot lower than what was originally planned, $1.449 million. And that board basically still has 3.2 million in the bank, 3.3 in the bank, plus what I'm projecting. So that's a pretty healthy surplus going into the end of this year, which will help with balancing next year. So here's what's left. Board needs to approve a budget by June 30th. There will be a lot of work done over the next month to finalize those expenditure estimates. We now know the announcement's probably going to be a little bit earlier. Our first meeting at BEBC will be March 29th to really get going. On April the 1st, there'll be a budget survey that will be issued. That's part of our budget timelines that were previously adopted. And then month of April, I think it's just going to be a blur of liaison, partner meetings, advisory committee, BEBC meetings as we sprint to that May 3rd date when the board can do first and second reading, which allows staffing to happen. The board can choose to finalize the budget at that date as well, should they wish. And so my really in conclusion, I'll just say I think we're going in with a sound surplus. We're still, I think we'll be able to come out of the budget with, still having surplus left within that 1 to 3% of operating budget. But I just tried to give you a bit of an overview of what we think our big issues are for the year.
Well done, Jason. Any questions of Jason at this time? Trustee Croft, your microphone's off.
There we go. Thank you. I have 2 questions, and I think they're pretty straightforward. So I'm going to ask the really easy one first. Our deadline is June 30th, but historically, we often pass the budget in May so that staffing can begin. That's correct?
Yeah.
And then my next question is, so there may be a $1.2 million surplus back from the first summary, and it looks like there's lots of places we can spend it. However, is any of that 1.2 million restricted?
Yeah, it isn't at this time. I'm not projecting what the restricted surplus could be. You're right. There are 2 or 3 different kinds of surplus now that we have in definition. That 1.2 would be all unrestricted. Okay, but now this year's financial policy procedures were required to consult on the surplus, and we're required to be thinking in 3-year budgets. And we do have a 3-year financial plan. So as we look at the surplus, it's probably not just going to be we need to look at how much can be used next year, but how much might be needed the year after and the one after that. And those are actual restrictions. So if the board has an idea that you think you're going to need a certain amount to balance in 2 years or 3 years out, those are actually restrictions on the surplus.
Got it. Thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah. I only have one more item. And that's the budget guiding principles. Going back there. And thank you to Mike Russell, who worked with us on reframing these. So as we begin to think about the creation of next year's budget, we like to put forward budget guiding principles into the start of that budget process. And so that we had a couple that related to the strategic plan in the previous year's version, and Mike consolidated them in a nice way. And so really the number one recommended budget guiding principles, and these aren't in any particular order, but I do think this actually probably is the most important. The budget must properly fund the priorities within the strategic plan. And so he's put together some language there. Is developed as a mechanism to aid in reconciliation, so keeping with that priority. Accounts for uncertainties of the global 19 pandemic and its effects on the school district. I think we're not quite out of the woods yet. We still need to be thinking about if there's something we need to be setting aside, whether that just be a contingency amount, not knowing what it might be yet, and can be reversed later, but I think we need to still be thinking about that. Must be developed in a transparent process that includes public and partner input through communication, consultation, and reporting back. We had that one last year, is developed on the principle of equity. We had that one last year. Of course, regulatory complies with the School Act, collective agreements, and other regulatory requirements and board policy. New considers multi-year implications of decisions. So that's sort of the multi-year planning piece. Balances short-term and long-term priorities. We can spend it today, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's around for the long term. So that, there's that balance between those priorities, and then maintains appropriate contingency balance. So those are what we have now that if suitable, we would like to move forward to the board for the next board meeting.
I have a question. Last budget season, we were dealing with trying to rectify a structural deficit, and we made some moves to do that. Why did we fix that problem, or do we still have a structural deficit coming forward? And if we do have a structural deficit that we're facing, why isn't that part of our guiding principles?
Yeah, I think, we're getting closer to fixing that. When I mentioned we spent about 1.4 million of surplus to help balance this year's budget, I mean, that's almost the same as what this year's financials are projecting as a surplus. So we're getting tighter. We did start out with more of surplus being drawn. So I would say that is narrowing, and we're being closer to not relying on surplus. But there's always there's only 3 ways the year end can finish. One, you have surplus, your revenues have exceeded expenditures. You're going to want that to be as close as possible, but we don't have crystal balls around budgeting. We make a lot of assumptions and we hope they come true. The other is revenues equal expenditures and you have no surplus. That's never happened. That's really, really hard. And then the negative position is your expenditures exceeded your revenue and you've actually created a deficit situation. So in the structural surplus, we're trying to get that closer, that revenue less expenditure line closer and closer. And we learn about our budget every year. I can see from this budget, why are we surplusing in EAs and clerical? Well, we probably have too much in that budget line, and it may be around the number of weeks or how that we're budgeting on. When people take their vacation, we need to look into that a little bit closer. But we can begin to tighten that up a little bit. But right now, our surplus projection is pretty close to what our shortfall is from the current year. So I would say that we're likely not going to actually need to necessarily draw on a lot more surplus to balance, all things being equal between the 2 years. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Well, It would be nice if we had a built-in structural surplus. I haven't heard that term before. It's usually a structural deficit that we've been wrestling with. So if we're on the right path,
we're getting
great.
closer. We're getting closer. But if you're budgeting for a structural surplus, then you're not spending the money on the kids of that year, right? Unless it's sort of in anticipation of needing to spend money in capital in a future year or part of the long-term planning. So I think as we begin to bring 3-year planning into the budget cycle, it'll really start to tighten that up, because now we need to be thinking way longer than just the next year around those structural items.
Great, thank you. So did you need a motion on this?
I did. I need a recommendation from the BEBC to recommend the budget guiding principles to the board.
Okay. Moved by Director DeGroot and seconded by Director Kimmler. Director, where'd that come from? That's old. Kimmler. Must be getting tired. All those in favor? Opposed?
Thank you.
Carried.
Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you very much. So I think we have one more item, and that's Trustee Kemmler.
And just be very short. We did have our advisory meeting and the minutes are attached. Please take some time to take a look at them. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other business comments? Motion to adjourn? Every hand shoots up. Trustee DeGroot, seconded by Trustee Kimmler. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Good night, everybody.